So we're going to just run through a bunch of things here, and as I put something up on the board, we're going to discuss briefly why it's there and any thoughts you have about it. So the first one is start and end on time, which I noticed we did not do today. However, we had a reason for not doing it, and it's the same reason that many of your clubs don't start on time. It's because not everybody is there yet, right? How many people have that situation? Yes, well, I know we're supposed to start now, but look, there's 3 people that I know are coming and they aren't here. Everybody, raise your hands? Yeah. We need to stop that. We need to get people there on time. And there are 2 ways to do that. One is to get people there on time, and the other is to move your club a little bit later if people are consistently not there because of traffic or because of something else. Do you have any thoughts about getting there on time, starting on time?
Yeah, when you wait for those other people, then you're disrespecting the ones that got there on
Exactly.
time.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
I think it is good to really make it clear that it's not possible to be there at that time and start at that time. So allow 15 minutes and create something like maybe some sharing or something to encourage people to be there at least 15 minutes before.
So you're saying build something in before the actual meeting starts.
Yes.
But the start time remains the early time.
Exactly.
And yeah, so for example, one thing that my home club does often, and the new president's right here, so I is go around the room and have people introduce themselves in a clever or creative way. That can take up to 10 minutes before you get into the bulk of the meeting. And it is still important material, and it's still speaking experience, and it can be very creative and fun if you do it right. Your name, your occupation, what part of town you live in, and the most exciting thing you've ever done in your life, or the most recent. That you can share in public.
That you can share in public.
Well, if you want to put that qualifier in. All right.
And who runs that meeting? That little pre-meeting?
Well, it often is the president in my club. You could create in a club whatever you want. The sergeant at arms could do that. The vice president of education could do that. The Toastmaster could do that. It's whatever your club decides. But what you're doing is, as he suggested, is you're building in a little bit of a buffer before. Some clubs have a brief business meeting in the front, where they at least get across how many members we have and how much money we have, and any events that are coming up. Those things that would be of interest to guests to know about the health of your club, right? So 3 or 4 minutes for a quick business meeting at the front serves a valuable purpose.
Before you start.
Well, it's before you introduce the Toastmaster.
Oh.
Yeah. So the introduction of the Toastmaster is really when things start. The Toastmaster introduces the functionaries, the speakers, the evaluators, blah, blah, blah. Right? So we build in a little something at the front. But the key is to start on time.
And do you gavel then? Before the...
That is our intention. We don't always do it, but with the president right here and with me speaking, I'm hoping he'll hear that. I know that he believes this. And he's got a chance now to do it, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering whether or not you should do this pre-meeting and then you gavel at 15 minutes later, and that starts the official meeting. I'm just asking.
That's something for your club to decide.
Thank you.
But the getting people quiet and getting started, turning off the cell phones and all that happens at the published start time. Why do we end on time?
Respect for people's time.
Out of respect for people's time. Right, exactly. So I'm sort of a little awkward here because I'm speaking to you all and the camera's over there. If you see me talking to the empty part of the room every once in a while, it's you people over there. Okay. All right. So that's one reason. And the other reason is so you can go home. And the other reason is because it looks efficient. And the other reason is because one of the reasons we are Toastmasters is because we want to practice staying on time. And if we continually don't stay on time, then we need to practice. We need to make it work. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is have an agenda and follow it. This is really important because I think many clubs have an agenda, but people don't volunteer for things, and you show up at the club meeting, and you have to go through 5 or 10 minutes of figuring out who's going to do what, and that's one of the things that makes the meetings late. You need to train your club to fill in roles. And if a role is not going to be filled in, you know, I was going to say delete it. You know, we have a joke master, we have an inspirational thought. Well, those things need preparation. Make sure that the people who know they have those roles have them in advance. Timer, counter, even evaluator does not require advanced preparation. Those you can fill in a couple seconds. But make sure that any speaking part is filled in advance and stick to it. Any thoughts about this before we go on? Okay. And the next one is the same thing essentially. Relevant themes work. How many of you use themes for have the Toastmaster use a theme? Rich, tell me a little bit about whether it works, what you think about themes.
We usually have the table topics master choose their questions, right, and then can interact with the Toastmaster to choose a relevant theme to that table topics.
Or it could go the other way just as easily.
Correct.
The Toastmaster could pick the theme, and the table topics master could adhere to it. What's the value of the theme? Why should we even do it? Why do we do it? Why?
Because it's fun. Can be exciting. Yeah. And
Because it can be, it's as simple as that. It can be fun, it can be interesting, it can be educational. And you know, every time there's a theme related to a holiday or 4th of July, something, I learned something in my club. And because people are creative, they want the Toastmaster wants to come up with something and be fun. And usually it's you learn something. So that's part of exciting, part of different. Ask your Toastmaster to develop a theme.
Are there any people who have babies with no theme?
we don't have
Yeah, many clubs, if it's left to the Toastmaster and it's not a rule, then, would you mind sitting over here?
Sure, balance the room out.
Yes, exactly. The camera's over there. Okay. If a club is not run rigorously by the president and the executive committee, and in particular the vice president of education, then it can get sloppy and not have a theme. Toastmasters usually have a theme. I mean, in the real world, outside of the Toastmasters Club. When you're the master of ceremonies, is another title for Toastmaster, you usually have some running theme. And it should be something that is relevant to the audience. So irrelevant themes don't work as well as relevant themes. And if you look in the list of holidays, every single day of the year, there is something unique that you can celebrate. It may be National Underwear Foundation Week, I don't know, but there's always something that you can play off of for fun or for education. So that's, I'm glad you asked. If your club does not have themes, talk to the Vice President of Education, talk to the President, talk to the Executive Committee, and suggest it, and say the reason for it is because in the long run, it will contribute with the 20 or 30 other things we're going to talk about to make the club more interesting and more fun and keep people coming back. Yes, sir.
If the Toastmaster arrives at a theme that the president considers not suitable, would the president mention it to the Toastmaster?
Certainly not after the meeting has started and the theme has begun.
Right.
But that could be part of the general evaluation at the end, a learning experience. It's hard. It would be wise for the Toastmaster to, if he's got any question or if she has any questions about the appropriateness of a theme, to check with someone else. So you make that part of the rule. Richard.
Our agenda is prepared by our VPE. The Toastmaster and the Table Topics Master are going to come up with the theme, and it has to be sent to the VPE for approval and included in the agenda, so it's never going to be.
There you have it. That's a wise suggestion, but each club runs itself. So you make up the decision, but if you think that sounds like a good idea, and I do, then I would say adopt it. Yeah, here. What's next up here? Okay. How many of you have clubs where speakers get up and they have not prepared an introduction for their speech and given it to the Toastmaster? Everybody. That must stop. The way I put a stop to it when I'm Toastmaster in a club is if someone does not give me, first of all, I call them and ask for it. But if there is none, I make one up that sort of makes fun of them a little bit. You know, Michael's our speaker today, and Michael, as you know, just arrived from Mars. He doesn't know much about this planet, so I'm not sure his speech is going to be relevant to you today. But let's listen and find out. Please welcome Michael Genovese. You know, I do something funny like that, but I also warn them in advance, and that usually gets it there. The reason for an introduction is to take a lot of the stuff that wastes time at the beginning of a speech and puts it in somebody else's hands, so that you are set up the way you want to be set up, so that the audience starts listening the way you want them to listen. We should probably have a whole 5 to 7 minute speech on how to give a good introduction. Anybody want to take that on for your club? I think that would be a great idea. But the introduction should give only the relevant information. I hate long introductions. When I say to people, you know, I ran a convention for 5 years with 60 speakers at the convention every year, and what I told them was, keep your wordy part of your introduction in the written material, the program that's handed out, and give me just to speak when I introduce you, the basics. You know, what you're talking about today, why it's relevant to the audience, what do you want them to get out of it, something brief, compact, maybe a word or two. You know, Michael has had 30 years experience in the broadcasting industry. I'm making this up, right. In the broadcast industry, and he brings his perspective on that to his topic today, which is blah, blah, blah. Please welcome. Yeah. A brief, short introduction. 30 seconds is great. 45 is a little long. 15 is probably a little short. But the introduction helps, you know, remember this is about how to make your meetings more, not just more exciting, but more interesting and more relevant, and then we'll keep people coming back. Long introductions will drive people away. And upgrade the quality of your evaluations. There are two things that I see that happen frequently in evaluations that drive me up the wall and make me want to not come back to a meeting. And the one is when the evaluator starts giving his opinion on the topic. That is not what an evaluation is about. I don't give a damn what your opinion is about the topic of his speech. What I want to know is how is his body language, his movement, his gesture, his use of his voice, the organization of the material, the content, not my opinion of the content, but whether there was enough support material, whether it was organized well, whether it was a central idea. But every evaluator should point out that he got the central idea and the main points of the speech. If you don't get those, you didn't get the speech. So if you have not had a good, working, intelligent speech on how to give evaluations, I'd say about every 3 months, every 4 months, somebody should do that in your club. Okay.
And how would you do that? That thing you just suggested? That would be a speaker topic? I missed something there at the end.
Well, okay, what I was saying was, the Vice President of Education's job is educating the club. And it's partly putting together the agenda. So he or she should say, is there someone who would like to give a speech 2 meetings from now on how to do an effective evaluation? And there are programs, you can earn points in Toastmasters, a speechcraft, or not a speechcraft, but
better speaker.
Better speakers. There's a better speaker program for that. You can get the speech from Toastmasters. Just go to Toastmasters.org and say, how do you do evaluations? And you'll have plenty of material. Okay, it's easy, but don't make it up. You know, there is solid information from Toastmasters available on how to evaluate. Yes?
Is this something that the VPE is supposed to give, or they ask one of the Toastmasters to do it during their...
Whichever works, yeah. I mean, in my opinion, the Vice President of Education should not do everything. They should schedule, they should plan, they should map out the meeting, but they should not always be the one doing the instruction. That gets boring. Part of the purpose of belonging to a Toastmasters club is that everybody gets to learn about how to speak and how to evaluate. Remember, evaluation is part of leadership. But speaking the evaluation is part of speaking. Good question. We're still working on the basics before we get to the fun stuff here. I recommend, I've been to clubs where, and some of the clubs that I belong to they have the speeches, and then they introduce the general, then they have table topics, then they have the general evaluator who introduces the evaluators and gets the reports and all that. My feeling, and it's my belief, and you may have it differently, and every club runs itself, but my feeling is that the job of the general evaluator is to evaluate the meeting as a whole, not to run part of the meeting. The job of the Toastmaster is to run the meeting all the way up until the end of the meeting. Then let's have the general evaluator come up and say what the Toastmaster did right, what the president did right, what the table topics master did right, how it could be improved a little bit, what worked in this meeting, what works in our club, and how could our club be a little bit better next time. That's the job of the general evaluator. Some people want to make the general evaluator literally a secondary Toastmaster. That robs the Toastmaster of a lot of the experience, in my opinion. And it doesn't add anything to putting the evaluator in and letting him handle half the meeting doesn't add to the value of the meeting.
Do you, by doing this, do you include the general evaluator being the one who introduces the functionaries?
Not at all.
No?
Toastmaster introduces the functionaries, the Toastmaster introduces the speaker, the Toastmaster introduces the table topics master, the Toastmaster introduces each of the evaluators, the Toastmaster calls for the functionary reports, and then either the Toastmaster calls for the general evaluator's report of the meeting, or the Toastmaster turns it back to the president, and the president calls for the general evaluator's report. Got it?
Got it. And
that places more responsibility on the general evaluator for evaluating the meeting and the content. And it doesn't make him a secondary Toastmaster and rob the Toastmaster of the full experience of being a Toastmaster.
Very interesting. It's a new concept. What you're saying is a new concept to me, only because I've got one club where we do have the club coach introduce the functionaries to the group, and he also evaluates functionaries, sort of, but mainly evaluates the Toastmaster and table topics master.
At the end.
At the end.
Yeah. Listen, every club runs itself.
I understand.
I'm just telling you, I have 38 years experience in public speaking. I started teaching public speaking the day I got out of college in 1966. And I've been teaching public speaking and public relations off and on in college ever since. And I teach a public speaking course at UCLA for public relations professionals. So I got a lot of experience in this. I've been a Toastmaster for 14 years. And I belong to, I've lost count of the number of clubs. I think it's 8 or 9 in the past 14 years. So I'm bringing my experience from all that.
Yeah. So what you suspect then there'd be value to having the Toastmaster introduce the functionaries rather than the club coach. That's
the Toastmaster's job. The club coach is different from a general evaluator usually. The club coach works privately with the executive committee to see that the club is on track and doing the things it's supposed to be doing. That's typically what a club coach would do.
Oh, permanently? Okay. Our club coach changes every week.
That's okay. Well, let's talk about that separately because that sounds like a unique situation.
I think they just use the word coach instead of evaluator.
Okay. Maybe you use the word coach instead of evaluator.
We do.
Yeah. We do. Okay. But you've heard what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Take it back to your club. See if it makes sense to them. The Toastmaster's job is to run the meeting from beginning to end. And if you start robbing the Toastmaster from some of that,
yeah, I see your point, and it does. The way we do it sort of robs the Toastmaster.
Yeah.
I see that.
Okay. And it also distracts the general evaluator, or the coach as you call him, from his real job, which isn't introducing people. It's judging is not the right word. It's recognizing the strengths and providing input on what can be better.
Very good.
So in your opinion, the general evaluator should not call the evaluators to give evaluation of the speeches either?
In my opinion, that's the Toastmaster's job. Now, the general evaluator can critique the evaluations and talk, I pick on Michael a lot because he's a good friend, and then Michael give a great evaluation. I'm the general evaluator. Michael's evaluation of you, Joe, was an excellent evaluation. It was good because of this and this and this. One thing he could do better next time is this. So he does a brief mini evaluation of the evaluator at the end, just as he would do a brief mini evaluation of the Toastmaster. Does that make sense?
Yeah. He doesn't waste his time an energy on the functionaries and functions of the thing, but on.
But he may at the end, he may critique the functionaries.
Right. So
Yeah, and that's very appropriate. And let me say something about that. It's not in my notes here, but the job, not the job, but one of the purposes of the functionaries, of the eye counter, the timer, and so forth, is to get newcomers some experience standing up and speaking. So if the eye counter says, "Hi, I'm the eye counter tonight," and sits down, that's not experience. If the eye counter stands up and says, vocalized pauses, ahs or ums, are disruptive to speaking and a problem, and they distract and people lose interest. So what we do here in the club is we keep count of them, and we report at the end, and we fine you a little bit, or whatever. Okay, so that now the person has had a little speaking opportunity. If the joke master, I don't know how many of you have a joke master tell a joke.
Yeah.
If the joke master gets up and tells a one-liner, he really hasn't gotten much experience telling a joke. But if the joke runs 15 or 20 or 30 seconds, or even 45 seconds, it's a little mini story, he has had valuable experience as a speaker. So this is all stuff for your, that will make your meetings more interesting and more fun.
Yeah, I'd like to validate your comments because I see what you're saying would make things simpler. More
Yes.
on that later.
Yes,
But
yes.
but now
And
the question-
simpler is also part of what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
I see your point, but I wanted to ask about Joke Master. We call it Chuckle Master.
Right.
What do people call, what do most clubs call this person, or what something?
Joke master, humorist. Joke master has the impression of a joke, and that could be a quick joke. Humorist, like Mark Twain was a humorist, he could go on for an hour on something. Chamber Communicators calls it the humorist, and we encourage people to spend a little more time and tell a longer story. If I had 3 minutes to spare now, which I don't, I would tell you about my chicken joke, which is a great way for people to start a speech. It takes me about 2 minutes to tell that joke. And it gets a huge laugh and puts people on your side at the beginning of the story. If we have time at the end, I'll do it, but let's go on right now. I recommend that at the beginning of the meeting, before the Toastmasters is introduced, that the president call on quickie reports from at least two or three key officers, and maybe others if it's necessary. One is, how healthy is the club financially? So, treasurer, what's our financial status? And in 15 seconds you can get it. Membership, how many members do we have? How many do we need? Do you have anything planned, any membership events? Public relations, are we doing anything? What are you doing to publicize the club? If you just can compact those real quick, and in 5 minutes or less, perhaps 3 minutes, you get all these officers' reports, bing, bing, bang. It shows guests and members how healthy the club is or where it needs work. Okay? If you put that at the end, it's sort of like an afterthought. If you put it at the beginning and give yourself an absolute maximum, I probably should have put 3 minutes on here because it's doable in 3 minutes. You can get 5 reports in 3 minutes or whatever. Okay. Okay, one of the things to keep people interested is if you know who the speakers are and what their topics are, and you send that out a day or two before the meeting, that might entice some people to come. It might also scare some people off, but if you make it if you ask your speaker to give you a really interesting, appealing, attractive sentence or two that you can put into the reminder to come, and that's something that educational vice president could do, or maybe even the secretary. It depends on how you want to work it. How many of you display members' progress charts at meetings? Toastmasters has big charts, and your club is very successful, isn't it? Yeah, that's something that should be done and updated, and people should bring their manuals, really work them, keep people involved. That's one of the things. Now, we only have 1 or 2 or 3 more basics. Let's see. Occasional guest speaker from another club, or from who's not a Toastmaster, but who is a really good speaker and has a 5 to 7 minute speech. Educational presentations. If you are not familiar with them, the Successful Club Series, the Better Speaker Series, and the Leadership Excellence Series, available from Toastmasters, are prepackaged speeches that people can give that help the club be more successful, that help the club speakers be better speakers, that help the leaders be better. And isn't this what Toastmasters is about? If you have one of these every other meeting, and these, by the way, help your members achieve the advanced leadership, advanced speaking credentials they need. So get your Vice President of Education to schedule these in maybe once a month. It will keep your meetings more interesting and more valuable, and that's what we're all about. Okay, now let's talk about, that's the basics. Now we want to talk for a minute about how we can make our meetings more fun. And by the way, you notice that I gave you a sheet of paper with little lines. So the little lines out here are for you to make any notes about this is something we should do, or if you have an idea that expands on the thought, that's what you should do. And so now we turn to page 2, and we're going to just go through a whole lot of things. How do you videotape your speeches? Like this is being videotaped right now. You do. And how do you use those videotapes? What happens to them after they're taped?
Members are able to view them.
Where?
Online.
On YouTube?
It's on our website. It's
On
not
your
YouTube. It's on our website.
However,
actually, I'm not sure how.
it's probably linked to YouTube, but in any case, members can see them. Can non-members see them?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have to have a code.
It's a private.
Private area. Okay, good. But do your members find that of value?
I have the passes.
Yours?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how many of your clubs are not doing this? Something to consider. And by the way, I don't know where my iPad is. If you're not aware of it, you just get somebody to sit there and hold the iPad, aim it at you, and push a camera, and you can record sessions on this thing. Have the person sit toward the front so the sound picks up pretty well. I recorded my session this morning and another session. Somebody else is recording this one. That's good. Okay. How about roasts? How many clubs have done a roast? How many does not know what a roast is? Okay, a roast is when you make fun of someone in a fun kind of way. So if we were to roast you, people who know about you would make up funny stuff about you, and everybody would speak for maybe 2 minutes, or a minute, or 2, or 3 minutes, and say funny stuff about you, and then you would get the opportunity to answer them back at the end. So if you've never seen a roast, Google roasts, and there'll be hundreds of them, celebrity roasts and all kinds of stuff. I have a 26-volume set of Dean Martin roasts of every celebrity.
You bought that?
I felt bad.
That commercial.
But they're funny.
I know
They're funny.
Probably Comedy
Yeah.
Central has taken that over. They've got a big series of roasts. They did Charlie Sheen.
And you can see them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a roast, once or twice a year, a roast, maybe you roast the outgoing president, because by then everybody knows him or her. Or maybe you roast the incoming. I'd roast the outgoing because the incoming
retaliation.
Yeah. that is going to be fun, and assign everybody in the club to come up with 1 minute's worth of funny material about the person.
And you can do that at your regular meeting, or different from your regular meeting?
Whichever you decide.
Good.
Yeah, it can work either way. We'll get to extra meetings in a few minutes. Yeah. Panel discussions. I've never done this. I've never been in a club. Well, actually, I think Chamber Communicators did a panel discussion about a year ago. We had a past president who was really kind of a ham and a fun ham, and he really enjoyed it. So a couple of times we've had meetings where it's sort of like a TV talk show. Yeah. So you can do something like that. Structure it. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Anybody ever done something like that?
I'm not within Toastmasters. I spoke on panels at college several times stuff, and it's choose a topic and let people run down.
I have been speaking on panels and putting together panels for 30 years. And here's a trick about having a successful panel that I use in my public speaking for public relations professionals class. And that is the person who produces and moderates the panel asks every panelist to come up with, to give him in advance, or her in advance, there are 3 or 4 or 5 key points. So like, let's say you are the moderator and producer of a panel, and these 3 gentlemen are on your panel. You would ask them to submit to you a couple of days in advance 5 main points they want to talk about under the general heading. You then can go back to them and say, so-and-so is doing this one, maybe you might want to come up with something else. You can make it work better. Then you have 15 points, and you can then produce a handout with 15 points on it and give that handout at the end of the session. You look efficient. Here's the biggest problem with the panel. The biggest problem with the panel is that people don't prepare. If I know there's a 30-minute panel and I've got 5 minutes, and there's going to be 5 minutes to get in, 5 minutes to get out. I know I can bullshit for 5 minutes, so I don't prepare. But if somebody asks me to list my main points, I got to prepare. So you are forcing people to prepare. You could do that exercise in 30 minutes in a club. Because we're going to have a 3-person panel, and it's going to be on, the panel discussion is going to be on ways to make our club meetings more interesting. And you 3 are going to submit to me your suggestions in advance. Now, all of a sudden, each of them has what they're going to talk about. They are forced to do it. Yes?
You'll include that as part of a regular meeting?
Could be. Yeah. And you can have, this takes planning. You can still have a speech or two. If your speech is if your meeting is a 1-hour meeting, it might be hard to fit something like this in. But if it's a 2-hour meeting or an hour and 50 minutes and you only have 2 speakers and 2 evaluators, you can fit in 25 minutes something else, a roast or a panel. Remember, what we're talking about is ways to make your meetings more interesting. Debates. Debates are where 2 people take different sides of an issue, and the Toastmaster or a moderator moderates. I'm not really a skilled debater. I don't know how to do it, but if you Google debates, you can come up with a way to have a debate that involves 2 people. That could be fun. Try again. You have to be a little careful about controversial issues. So if you get people in the club at odds, maybe a little bit careful about that. Practice radio or TV interviews where you have an interviewer and a person being interviewed. And the interviewer knows the questions, and the person being interviewed doesn't know what's going to be asked. And they can maybe make stuff up. It can be almost like a table topics. That can be fun.
Is that a regular speech? Is that a program speech? One of those?
I think in one of the advanced manuals, there's something you can do that with. Yeah, but if you did it just as a fun thing, it wouldn't be a manual speech, no. But it might be considered table topics, and table topics is one of the things you have to do for the leadership, for the competent leadership. If you don't know about competent leadership, go to your leadership manual, look in the back, and you'll see all the things you have to do to get the Competent Leader Award. And one of them buried in the middle there is you have to do table topics. Radio TV interview, we talked about that, okay. Progressive storytelling. This is a how many people don't know what I'm talking about? Okay, so that's where, and I see this in the table topics, where the table topics master starts telling a story with characters and a situation, and at certain moments stops and asks you to continue the story. That's progressive storytelling. It's a fun way to do table topics maybe once every 3 or 4 months, or maybe only twice a year, but it adds a little value, a little interest, keeps people on their toes, and it can be very funny. How many of you vote for the best functionary? We vote for best speaker, best evaluator, best table topics. One way to add to a little drama to the functionary thing is to have a ballot for best functionary. So how well does the counter, the timer, how creatively do they explain their role? How much fun they had the humorist, the joke teller, the inspirational or whatever kind of spiritual thing at the beginning, the Pledge of Allegiance person. Who uses their functionary role in the most creative way? That can add interest. And what that does is it forces people to do more of Pledge of Allegiance, please stand and put your hand over your heart, I pledge allegiance. No, they're going to tell a little story about something relating to patriotism, the flag, history of the country, something like that. And then the joke person says, "Oh, I got to be more creative. I got to have a better joke because I'm up against these other people." The Rising Star Club, which trained me for 5 years, my first club, we used to have that award. Okay. Creative trophies. So one of the things I do from time to time is I go to thrift stores and I look for and find trophies for $2. Let's see, this one was 99 cents. This one was $1.99. Okay, and then I put things on them like, this is the Vice President of Education's trophy for the best movement and gestures. And if I decide somebody's really good, they get that trophy. Here's a Best Evaluator trophy. Now the person who wins this trophy has to bring it back 2 weeks later. So they keep getting reused. This one is tonight's Best Leader Award. That's for the Toastmaster, the President, or the General Evaluator, or the Table Topics Master. Which one did the best job? This is Hollywood Best Performer, and this one can be given by the Vice President of Education without a vote. So, and then you can also do things like buy a tennis trophy for the best lob, whatever, or a baseball trophy for hitting it out of the park with your speech. You know, there are all kinds of fun ways you can use creative trophies, and using your computer, you just print this stuff out, use a little glue, put it on there. You can change them from time to time. Just make sure people bring it back, but it's only, these things are a dime a dozen in thrift stores. Get a ladies wrestling trophy. Okay, incentive certificates.
Inventive.
Inventive, thank you. Well, incentive too. Yeah, in place of, before I started doing the trophy thing, I had certificates for best use of language, things like that. And we would just, you know, we'd handwrite in the names, but the certificate was, so inventive certificates are a way to make things more fun. How many people know and understand Robert's Rules of Order? So, okay, and how many don't? Okay, so get someone to give a speech on effective use of Robert's Rules of Order. It is one of the key ways you run meetings. It's one of the most important tools in the meeting world. And the big Toastmasters annual meeting rely on it heavily, but it's something that everybody should learn in a Toastmasters club. And we don't have much opportunity to practice it, but in your office, in your executive committee meetings, you should know the basics. Some things like the phrase, "I call the question." So if we're having if there's a motion and a discussion on the motion that's going on, and it's going on, and it's going on, somebody can say, "I called the question." That is a privileged motion. The president or the presiding officer immediately has to take a vote on whether or not we stop discussion. Call the question means we actually have to vote on the damn thing and not keep going on and on about it. And if most of the members agree that we're going on and on about it, they vote to call the question, then you move immediately to vote yes or no on the motion. Very valuable thing. There's some other stuff, not a lot, but there's some very valuable Robert's Rules things that you should know. Brainstorm ideas. You can use the club meeting itself to say, how can we make our meeting more exciting, more valuable, more interesting, more fun? And spend 5 minutes once every 2 or 3 months, especially if there's no guest there that night. This is an interesting one that I saw. I was reviewing a lot of different clubs' ways to make their evaluations more exciting. So suppose that you have 3 speeches tonight, and you do not assign evaluators. But you say instead, the Toastmaster says, we're going to have our 3 speeches, and then we're going to call on someone to evaluate the first speaker, and we'll call on somebody else to evaluate the second speaker. So every one of you, on paper, prepare your evaluation, because you may be the one who's called on to evaluate. That's called random evaluations, and I'm recommending that to our club. I think it's an awesome idea.
I'm always the guy who points out spelling errors, so I'm doing my job today. You have one there.
Random evaluate. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well,
yeah, I did this last night I went to a play last night, came home at midnight and did this. Okay. Stage distractions. Now, Chamber Communicators meets in a cocktail lounge, so it's 3 hour distractions, you don't have to worry about it. My Lofty Speakers group meets in a restaurant next to all the service of food and stuff in the next room, so we don't have to worry. But if you meet in a lovely, quiet place like this, you might find a way to plan some distractions for your meeting. How you do that, I'm not sure. Maybe you have somebody walk in and out and rearrange the chairs and furniture. I'm not sure, but planned distractions are a way to train people how to deal with distractions. And often that means speaking louder, getting closer to the audience, keeping your audience's attention with your eyes and your movement and your gesture. All the tools that you have to come into play if there's waiters coming in and out, or if there's school children playing in the next room. I had to give a 20-minute talk at a First Presbyterian Church in Hollywood last week, and they kept saying they had 100 police cadets who had just graduated, and I was talking to them about earthquake safety, and there was all these kids playing in the next room. So I just used the mic a little louder and talked a little louder, and I came down off the platform and got down here with the audience, and I kept their interest and attention. Well, how do you do that? You practice it. That's how you do it. Joint meetings. This is a meeting where you serve marijuana and everybody has a joint. No, you might have a meeting with another club. Don't put that. Do not put that in the minutes. Okay? It's where you have a meeting with a friendly club, maybe another club from your area. Your club might be with the West Hollywood Club sometime. I think that would be great. Meet in members' homes. I know that at Christmas every year, our club used to meet at the president's house, and it was a potluck dinner, and we did have 2 speeches and 2 evaluations, but the rest of the time was, and table topics, but the table topics was always holiday oriented, and we had a lot of fun with it. The Rising Star Club I used to did that every year at Christmas too, and there, you can do a summer club by a pool party. Yeah.
Well, on the 5th week of the month, 5th Thursday that we meet, we have a speech-a-thon, and it's strictly potluck and 10 speeches. Everything else about the meeting is suspended.
I don't know if I have speech-a-thons on here or not, so you might put that on one of the blank lines on the next page. That's a good idea. What's next? Quizmaster. A quizmaster's role would be come toward the end of the meeting, would be introduced by the Toastmaster, and would ask people random questions about something that had happened during the meeting, somebody's speech, an evaluation, something that had gone on during the meeting. Maybe 3 or 4 questions. Just a fun way to make sure people are listening. And then maybe you have a little certificate, best response, best listener of the evening. You can give out a little certificate for that. And if people earn 5 of those certificates, they get a free burger at McDonald's. Yes.
One of the clubs that I attend has the role of a listener, and they listen and write down statements. At the end of the meeting, they say the statements and the members guess who said it.
It's good. Very similar. Good idea. Write that down, everybody. Let's see. What time are we supposed to end? 4:30?
4:20.
4:20. Oh, I'm going to go fast then. These are all on the list. Book review night, that's kind of obvious, where you assign several members to review a book and find a way to fit that into the manual speech. You can easily, a manual speech does not give you the topic. It gives you the learning objectives. And so you could easily make a book report and have 2 or 3 people do those. Mic training night, where you actually have a microphone and people have to use it, learn how to use it. Potlucks, if it's appropriate. I know there's one club that I go to that has assigned someone to bring brownies at every meeting, and she's been bringing brownies for every meeting for a year now. And that's a little much to put on somebody. But maybe you assign somebody each, or 2 people each time, or you have a potluck once every 2 months. Maybe it's a special guest event where you have guests come. A joke-a-thon. A joke-a-thon is exactly what it sounds like. Every member is assigned to tell a joke. Or, maybe half the members this week and half the members next week. Talent night or hobby sharing night. You can figure out what these are. Skit or improvisation night. Now, we've just started an improvisation club. It hasn't started meeting yet. But figure out some way to get people to get up in front of the room and improvise. I'm not an expert on that, but I picked it up from somebody else. Costume night, or my favorite, which I created and haven't done yet, is hat night. But I have about 30 hats now that I'm going to give a speech where each hat represents a different side of my nature or a different job or something I've done in the past. But on that, where everybody wears a different hat or a different costume. Remember, we're trying to make things interesting and fun, right? Celebrate. How many of you celebrate the club's anniversary? How many of you even know when the club's anniversary is? You do. One of you. Okay. It's information you can find out from Toastmasters. It's actually probably on the dashboard or somewhere in the Toastmasters stuff. And have a big deal. Have a party. Halloween ghost story night. Read your own poem night. That one. what it said was read a poem night. And I can see where that would be deadly, but if you get people to write their own poem, maybe a 1-minute poem, it could be far more interesting and revealing about the character and the nature of the people. Community action night, this is where people are assigned to give speeches on things they would like to see happen in the community, or that have happened in the community. Change your room layout. So you've been meeting facing this way, sometimes turn all the chairs around, face the other way, or that way. You got 4 different options, or maybe more if you do angles. Find a different layout for the room sometime. Pick a weird holiday to celebrate. Once again, if you go online, every day there's something weird being celebrated. Find a way, you know, on the night that you're meeting, what is the weird thing that's being celebrated? And that's the end of my list. Anybody got anything they want to contribute? Yes, sir.
I want to ask, maybe is it successful to do movie review, anything like book review, movie review?
Movie review, absolutely. Yeah, probably more relevant since nobody reads books anymore. Or a website review night. Be creative. You know, this list was just a starter list. And the reason that I read all those blank lines on the next page is stuff that you're going to tell me. So, how many people have thought in the course of this session, how many people have heard a couple of things they would like to try in their club? Okay, I deputize you to make that happen, okay? Because it isn't going to happen if you don't make it happen. And if you're, how many are club presidents? 4, good. How many are vice presidents of education? Good, so we've got really the right people in this room. And what are you?
Membership.
And what are you? Nothing. Good, you have a great future now. You have a lot of information. And see, you're never nothing. If you're a member of the club, you are something. And you can provide input to any officer. Sit down and say, look, I went to this fabulous session. This absolutely fabulous session about 15 ways. And you know what? I didn't get 15 ways to make the club more exciting. I got 31 plus 41, 43 ways. And I made some notes of my own. There's like 50 ways we can do. And we only have 25 meetings a year. This is a 2-year list, for God's sakes. Okay.
You could become the theme master for your club.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you can be the theme master. Tell them we need a theme master. I'm going to be the assistant to the vice president of education, and I'm going to be in charge of coming up with themes every meeting. Yeah, good, creative, very good. All right, anybody have comments they want to add for the video, for each other, or just to get it off your chest, or because you've got a brilliant idea?
Well, I don't know how brilliant it is, but it's fun. A backwards meeting.
Yeah, I've heard about that, and I don't understand that, and I got it. They're talking about a backwards meeting, which is where you start at the end by evaluating speeches that haven't been given. And you give the ah counter report by telling people how many ahs they're going to say. And you give the grammarian's report by telling people whose bad grammar is going to be. And the timer tells how long people are going to speak. And then the speeches come, and it just does everything backwards. I'm told it can be fun and creative. I think maybe if you do it once every 2 years.
That's kind of like the improv club.
Have you ever done it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
It's like the improv club.
Yeah, well, the
You just make
improv.
things up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, no, backwards club doesn't make things up. You have an agenda.
Well, yes.
And then you just reverse it.
Right.
Yeah.
But how do you evaluate someone's speech?
That's where you
That's where you have to be creative.
Okay.
I evaluate your speech, and then you have to give the speech that I evaluated.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And if I say, Michael's speech was absolutely brilliant. Every word was carefully crafted. There was not a single vocalized pause. However, he did have his hands in his pockets for about 2 minutes in the middle of the speech, and he stood like a rock in one place when he could have moved a little bit. But other than that, it was a spectacular speech. Then you have to give that speech. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's a challenge.
I'm sorry Elizabeth wasn't here, dear. I'll check. Sorry. Anything else? This is great. Listen, as many of you know, if you've been in sessions with me, I don't say thank you at the end. I thank people for what is, for something meaningful. I love getting up in front of people and speaking. You may have noticed that, okay? And it only works for me if you are attentive, not one of you fell asleep, and if you participate. Every single one of you participated, and that's what makes me want to thank you. And that's what I thank you for being a great audience. Thank you.